Ruhi Jushing Meng Tu Drum Mira Ling Shi Nyende Genpadi Sangye Shindu Mite Unwargi Jokunanda Shingma Chiparsho Idam Guru Ratnamandala Kamya Tayami Sangye Chudam Soki Chudnama Janchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushingi Pye Sunangi Jola Panchir Sange Juparsho Sange Churam Soki Chakama Janchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Dagi Junhengi Pe Sunangi Jola Panchir Sange Juparsho Sange Churam Soki Choknama Janchu Bardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushengi Pe Sunangi Jola Panjir Sange Juparsho. So we'll start with a meditation. Start with the meditation from class 4 of trying to identify the imaginary object that emptiness is empty of. Relax your shoulders, your neck, your jaw, your hands. Pull in your tummy a little bit. A small smile on your face. And begin to bring your mind inside, using your breath as a guide to pulling your energy in. You can feel it as it goes out the tips of your nostrils and comes back in. And then when your mind is quiet, bring it to the imaginary object that emptiness is empty of. So whatever insight you may have had in these few moments, try and bring it to the forefront of your mind and make it firm. As a place to revisit during another meditation. And then bring your mind back to this room. The 3 long exhales. When you're ready, open your eyes and stretch. And we'll begin class 5 on logic. Which is a review of ACI 13. Before we do that, so I wanted to ask you guys who are here in the class and anybody who's listening, what is the imaginary object that emptiness is empty of? Were you able to find that?
I find the wording there confusing. I find the wording confusing. I assume they're saying, like, look for that self-existent object that is really empty, that you think isn't. But the way it was stated was hard.
So Tahia says she found the wording confusing. I must say I did too. I kept repeating it over in my mind. The imaginary object that emptiness is empty of. What about you guys?
To me, it's another way to say exactly what you said, the self-existent object, but it's just another way to get your mind to try to come at it from another angle. So that helps me to have, that's not my favorite wording of it, but it helps me to have different wordings because it makes you go different paths.
Ale, what about you? What happened?
For me, it was really difficult to see emptiness as empty. Okay, I don't have the right concept to put the emptiness as negative thing. So it was very, very hard to present some object or something. I was like, I don't know.
Where I went with it was, okay, we're talking about a lack of something. And the imaginary thing is the thing that has something. It's the self-existent emptiness that we think. I mean, this is just where my mind went. The self-existent thing that we think exists. And the emptiness of that is that it doesn't exist in that way. But if you're looking for emptiness, it's not a positive thing. So you can't find something that isn't there, right? It was like, wait a minute, it's a lack. How can I find a lack? You know, to find something, it has to have some positive solidity to it. And so that's kind of just where my mind began to play with it a bit, and trying to figure out what these words framed in this way. Because, you know, like you, Tahia, I just kept playing it over. It's like, imaginary object that emptiness is empty. What does that mean? You know, what does that mean?
Emptiness is empty of the self-existence.
Of emptiness.
Is it of emptiness or of the imaginary object?
Well, emptiness is always attached to an object. So here our object is emptiness, it appears to me in this question, which is not, and it's not an object, it's a lack of something.
It's like a Zen.
And, right, it's like a Zen koan. And if we look at what is emptiness, we do think about it generally as a self-existing thing, right? We don't think about it as lack of something. So the emptiness of emptiness. Right? It's just some thoughts, and I think it's good for us to like try and share our thoughts about it and try and figure out and chew on it and go back to it. We get to do it for a little bit and see where it takes you. And playing with the semantics of it and what you know about emptiness and what you know about self-existent objects and things that lack self-existence. I mean, I don't know any more than the rest of you. So class 5 on logic. This logic was covered in depth in course, ACI Course 13, and used a book, a commentary on valid perception called Sema Namdra. Is it Sema?
Sema?
Namdra.
Namdra.
Sema Namdra. Or Pramana Vartika. It was written by Lobsang Chuki Drakpa, who is a very important master in our tantric lineage. Chuki means Dharma. Drakpa is the same as Kirti, like in Dharma Kirti, meaning famous. So Lobsang Chuki Drakpa is his Tibetan name, and his Sanskrit name is Master Dharma Kirti, and he lived around 650 AD. It's the classic logic text that defends an earlier book on Buddhist logic by the master Dignaga, who was the founder of Buddhist logic. In the monastery, you study 5 great books. The first book you study, and you study it for like 12 years, is the Abhisamaya Alamkara, which is on the perfection of wisdom. For 4 years, you study Uma Madhyamika Avatara, you study the middle way. For 2 years, you study Zu, or the Abhidharma Kosha, which is from the Vaibhashika school. For 2 years, you study Dhulwa, which is how to tame your mind, ethics. And for 3 or 4 months every year, for 12 years, you studied Sema, or valid perception. So this just gives you an idea of what is studied for a Geshe degree in the monastery. So what is a valid perception? We are having valid perceptions all day long, every day. It's just our normal perceptions if we're not under the influence of drugs or alcohol or jealousy or anger, some very strong emotion like that. So then what is a non-valid perception? What is a non-sema or a non-pramana? Well, imagine, since the 3 of us who are here all live or have lived at Diamond Mountain, you're driving down to Bowie or driving home from Bowie in dusk in the fall, and you're going through the pistachio orchard. And in the fall, leaves are blowing across the road. But in the twilight, in the dusk, you see one going, and it's like, you think it's a mouse, and you swerve or screech on your brakes. You're not going that fast, so you don't really screech on your brakes, but you stop, and you realize that it's not a mouse. It's just a leaf blowing by, right? It is, say, Sema Mingilop. Sema Mingilop. It's a moment of false perception. You thought it was a mouse. You reacted as if it was a mouse. Given the information you had at that prior moment, it was a valid perception, but it was not a correct perception. It was a false perception. So why do we need to study logic? Why do we need to study perceptions? You're at work, or you're someplace, you're at home with other people, you get jealous at someone, or you think that they're, out to hurt you in some way. Something bad happens, right? And what is your first reaction? To blame them, right? And maybe they're there physically, maybe they aren't. Say you tripped over something in your house, and you blame the person who left it there, right? They're not even present. And why do we do that? Because we've had interactions with this person before, maybe, that then make us suspicious about their actions. And so we give meaning to everything that they do. We give meaning. We make it into a bigger picture than it really is. So logic is the science of how do you know if something is true or if it's false, right? And what are the different ways of seeing something? How do we know what is true? How do we know what is false? How do we decide? Through logic, through phenomena. And this is really important for a spiritual practice. How do we know that it's true that we can become an enlightened being? How do we know it's true that planting positive seeds work? How do we know that the fire is hot, even if we don't touch it right now? So these are, we use our logic. We can look at a flame, and we don't even have to touch it at this point in our lives to know it's hot. So the first thing they learn in the monastery at, say, around age 12 or 13 is how to debate. How to think, how to find, and through debate to how to find out what is true. So we have this gorgeous debate ground out here, and during Diamond Mountain University, 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week, we would go out here at nighttime and we would pair up and we would debate, trying to figure out the truth of those things that we didn't understand. Like our meditation we did just now. What is the imaginary object that emptiness is empty of? Like trying to figure that out through logic, through debating, through a format, a very specific way of doing it. So in the monastery, they do debate 3 to 5 days a week, always at night. And also every other day in the mornings for about an hour. They have a special courtyard, and you kind of mill around, and then you catch somebody's eye, and then you kind of ask them if they want to debate with you, and you debate. So it's one-on-one. One person sits down. They are the one who's being asked the questions of, and one is standing up, and they are the one who's asking the questions, right? And you get a rosary, which I don't have with me, but Ale does. Maybe. Thank you, my dear. So you get a rosary, It's been so long since I've used the rosary. This summer. Yeah. You pull it back and you say D, G-tar, Chu-chen, but you're standing up. Right? And D means this wisdom. D, 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 D is the seed syllable of Manjushri, and it's asking for Manjushri's wisdom. D, D. So you have to be on your toes and think really fast when you're in the debate ground, which is why I'm not really good at it, because I like to sit and think about things. My mind doesn't work that fast. So D, G, tar, chu, chen. So you're asking, what about this? And chu, chen is the subject of the debate. So why, so we have this whole debate, and why should we do it? Why should we study logic? One, Gyelse of Jay, as I said before, said the kindest thing that Lama Tsongkhapa ever did for him was to teach him Buddhist logic. If you are ready, studying Buddhist logic triggers your intellectual capacity and empowers you to see emptiness directly, especially the study of Chi Chedrak, which we will get into, especially the study of mental images. And then, so within this, students can be described according to those capacities, according to the levels of intellectual and spiritual ability. There are two types. Say Wangtul, Deba, Chejong. Wangtul Deba, Chejong. So this is somebody who follows Buddhism or anything really out of blind faith. They're called people with dull power because they haven't thought about it. They just follow it because they like the guy who is teaching it, or it feels good or something like that. And this kind of faith is unstable because it's not based on anything except maybe charisma or a sense of feeling good or safe, right? And this kind of faith, it's a karmic ripening. And karmic ripenings, they ripen, and then they're done, right? They're temporary. So this kind of faith is very helpful at the beginning of any kind of spiritual practice. And then you have to use it to go deeper so that you have a strong foundation. Because just like a building, you need a strong foundation. Because when the winds come along to disturb your practice, you have to be solid in it. And you have to understand it through logic, not just because, oh yeah, I liked what that guy said. Or that felt good to me. That feels right to me. It needs to be grounded in something much more solid. Otherwise, it's just like a house made of hay. And when the wind comes, it'll just fall over. Huff and puff and blow your house down. The second kind, say, Wang Nun, Rikpe, Jejong. Wang Nun, Rikpe, Jejong. This is a student with sharp powers, with sharp intellectual powers. They follow because of their reasoning is sharp. They don't accept what any teacher just says until it makes sense to themselves logically. So where do the qualities of a Lama, of a path, of yourself, of anyone, of anything, where do those qualities come from? Yourself, your karma. They come from yourself and your karma, right? From your seeds. So the natural thing that happens with blind faith is that you see a teacher as self-existently good, self-existently correct. You see the path as self-existent. And then you get this ignorant attachment to things. Ignorant meaning that you're not seeing them as they ultimately are, which is your mama is not self-existent. Your teacher is not self-existent. Your partner is not self-existent. The path is not self-existent. And then, because you're holding them in that way, you produce dirty karma. So this is where the little drawing that I can't project comes in, where you have faith and your faith is high, and over time, we're talking not faith based in logic. It goes downhill and it gets lower and lower. But when you study logic, when you use logic and wisdom to understand things, then that kind of faith gets stronger and stronger over time, because you've tested it out. And from my experience, there have been numerous times when my faith in the path and my faith in my teachers were tested. And if I had just had blind faith, I probably would not have weathered the storm very well, because I had logic and years of checking things out. Even though it was still a storm, I was able to weather it. Remembering that I had created this situation, that it was not independent of me. And that's painful when you see things happen that are scary or anyway, it's painful and it's hard. It's really hard. So we need to use our logic. So the second reason we study logic is to go beyond faith, to understand and to analyze hidden reality. Hidden reality. So a valid perception is seeing directly or using logic to establish the truth of something that we can't see directly. There are things that we cannot see directly, that influence us. And we use logic to establish them. Just like an astronomer in the past, they could see by looking at planets closer to us that there had to be another body of something because of the way the elliptic of that planet was the planet that they were looking at, but they couldn't see it. It was a hidden object, but they used logic. And then as their telescopes got stronger and stronger, they were then able to see that object. And this is what we want to do with our minds, to make our telescopes stronger and stronger. We can see that something is affecting something, but we can't see what that other something is. And so we want to make our telescope stronger, which is our wisdom. And we use that through logic. And it's another kind of seeing. It's an inner kind of seeing. It's not the seeing that we see with our eyes. It's an inner seeing. And sometimes we say we see with our third eye. It's, one up here in the pineal gland. So, say Denzin,
Tenzin,
Denzin,
Tenzin,
Denzin, Zen, we've been using this word a lot in the past couple of days, means to hold. And Den means truth. So, to hold as true. It means keeping the Dharma safe in the world. The great Sakya Pandita said that the only people qualified to keep Buddhism safe in the world are those who understand and can logically prove the truth of Buddhism. So there's another reason. If we can't logically explain it to ourselves, how are we ever going to be able to logically explain it to somebody else? How are we going to be able to help them? Because we don't understand it ourselves. Why? Because we're lazy. We didn't think about it. We didn't take the time. It's that lazy doubt, right? That tetsum. So we need to take the time to do that. So it says, suppose a person comes to understand the scriptural tradition for how to reason, the art of proving or disproving things. A master like this is a person who keeps the teachings of the totally enlightened Buddhas safe here in the world. And in Tibetan, if you're looking for it, Nicole, it starts with Deta Drupdang, Sunjingi, Rikpe Shungluk, Gangi She, Kepa Dene Zope Yi, Sange Kini Tempa Zen. So if you can't prove Buddhism to yourself, the teachings are going to disappear, right? We must understand why we believe in the Dharma. And as first generation American Buddhists, this is really important, right? We have a chance to be able to spread these precious teachings, but not just because we believe it, because we've thought about it logically, we've tried it, we've seen how it works, we can share these experiences with others, and we can help them to logically go through it themselves. Well, if A is true, then what about B? If B is true, then what about C? And so bring somebody up through doing it sweetly and gently and getting them, helping them to find the answers themselves, not being told. So, if it doesn't make sense, what did Lord Buddha say? Either put it on the shelf or go do something else that makes more sense to you. Find something else that does. The third reason to study logic is to learn not to judge others. Logic proves that it's illogical to criticize. Every quality of every perception we ever have is a ripening of my karma based on my past actions. So, is there a reason Lord Buddha said, and I'm going to say it to you in Tibetan because I think it's a really sweet blessing, and then we'll do it in English. Naam dang drawe gansaki susungi, gansaki gansaki tsuminse, misungte, nampar yutare. If you are not me, or someone like me, this is Lord Buddha talking, you should never judge another, for you shall surely fall. Lord Buddha said this. And it comes from a story of a bodhisattva monk who came to live with his followers at a monastery. And the monastery, like most monasteries, are outside of a town. Sometimes towns build up around monasteries, but usually they're outside of a town. And so this Bodhisattva monk, he would study with his followers and other monks in the monastery, and then he would go to town. Now, monks and nuns are not supposed to go to town. They're supposed to stay at the monastery. But he saw that the people in the town were ready to receive the Dharma. And normally lay people, people who were not monks and nuns, did not get teachings. It wasn't a normal thing that happened. If you wanted to be educated in the Dharma, unless you were rich, but normal village people, you had to go to the monastery and become a monk or nun. And he saw this. And it's not proper etiquette, right? You're supposed to stay there and study and keep a contemplative, quiet life. And this monk, he would go to town and he would teach the lay people. And then there was another monk in the monastery who started noticing that this guy was going to town all the time. And, you know, he wasn't supposed to do this. He was supposed to stay in the monastery. And we get self-righteous about these things. Right? It's human nature. We do. We criticize other people. That's what this whole story is all about. And they began to complain to each other about it, going, hey, you know, so-and-so is doing this. And they go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it started to be a big thing until the abbot of the monastery heard about it. And it was starting to disrupt things in the monastery. So the abbot called the monk to him and he said, you know, you going to town is really disturbing things here in the monastery. Would you please act like you're supposed to act? And why was it disturbing people's minds? What did they think was going on in town? Right? Did they know that he was going to teach people? What do you go to town for? Drink, play, gamble, go and have a good time in town, right? I'm just making this assumption. That also gets you in trouble. So the abbot warned the monk and his followers if they did not stop, that they'd have to leave the monastery. So they chilled for a while and they stayed in the monastery. But then the lay people started to complain. It's like, what happened? This monk was teaching us the Dharma. We really want to learn the Dharma. And so they came to the abbot and, said, we want our monk back. He's teaching us the Dharma. So again, probably not with the abbot's consent, the monk who heard, the complaints of the lay people, he and his followers went back to town to teach the lay people of the town. And therefore, the abbot had to ask them to leave because he said, if you continue to do this, you've got to leave. So why is Lord Buddha telling us this story? He was that monk who began to judge the other monk who was going into town. And he caused this other monk to have to leave the monastery. For what? For doing something virtuous. And so Lord Buddha was the one who started the complaining and started the judging of what this other monk was doing. Lord Buddha has all these stories of his past lives. And he says, for this he lost his robes for 500 lifetimes and was reborn as a dog for 500 lives. So through this, Lord Buddha is giving us his personal advice. Look, this happened to me. Don't do it. So through learning pramana, through learning object, we can then have the wisdom to judge what is true and what is not true. Or at least take care of our own mental afflictions. Whose mental afflictions do we usually deal with first? Our own or others? Others, right? That's why we have this little book here. Right? Let's deal with my mental afflictions. Let's not keep somebody else's book for them. Right? So, we can use logic to help us stop this habit of constantly judging others. So, if the practice put forward by Lord Buddha works, if Buddha's perception works, then our lives should get sweeter than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, however long you've been practicing. So you can check. Does it work? Is your life getting sweeter since you've been practicing? And anyway, how do you know what other people are thinking or why they are doing something? Do you truly know? Do you have omniscience? Maybe you do. I don't. I don't know why someone is doing something. And do I judge others? Yeah. It's been a lifelong struggle for me. I think it's one of my biggest mental afflictions, is judging others. So, what if we could do reverse paranoia and think that that person, rather than trying to hurt us, is trying to help us? Even when to me it appears like they're criticizing me. Maybe they're trying to help me to stop judging others, or whatever it happens to be, to understand other people's viewpoints, not just that mine is right. And even if you don't overcome it, the struggle is really important. The fight with yourself. It's those little battles that you have that will eventually help you to overcome your mental affliction. Because you're constantly chipping away at it, piece by piece. So there's still some hope. Number 4 is you become, say it, Seme, Kebu. Seme, Kebu. One who is a person of valid perception. You become a master in logic. And you become one who is qualified and capable to keep the Dharma in the world. So what makes something a pramana? There are 2 types of pramanas. Say nunsum sema. Nunsum sema. Direct, valid perception. It doesn't involve conceptualization. It is direct. You have experienced it. You've experienced it through seeing, through hearing, through feeling, through thinking. It can be focused on an outer object or on your own thoughts. And the second kind is a Japaksema, which is a deductive, valid perception. And this involves conceptualizing something. So, I have this pen in my hand. I need you guys to look up. I have this pen. What happened to the pen?
You must have put it down behind your back.
Why must I have put it behind my back? What?
The chicken ate it.
A chicken ate it. Okay, a chicken ate it. I must put it behind my back. Any other? Why? Did you see me put it behind my back?
Yeah. Well, I thought it go behind your back.
And what do you see now?
None.
It's not in my hand. So I must have left it behind my back, right? Or dropped it or something. Did you see that directly? No. You put 2 things, 3 things, several things together. You conceptualized it and went, ah, she put that pen behind her back and left it there. I don't know where it is. The chicken ate it. Okay, we'll start with a different pen. So in Buddhism, this is just as valid a perception as a direct perception. Because you used logic to see something that was hidden. You couldn't see behind my back what happened. But you could see that my hand went behind my back, and that when I brought it out, there was nothing there. So you put these things together. The question is, sometimes, do we put them together correctly? So there are many kinds of reality which we can only figure out later, that we can only deduce later. So, don't short yourself by saying, because I can't see it, it doesn't exist. There are many things we can't see. I mean, can we see Pluto? We're told it exists, and we trust the scientists who tell us that it exists, and we trust the pictures we see on the internet, although there are pictures on the internet that we should not trust. Because Photoshop is very good at things. Right? So we can deduce things. Scientists deduce that the solar system is expanding by looking at particles and looking at pictures of different light years away. Right? So if you perceive emptiness directly, it's as good as seeing it with your eyes. Both direct and deductive reasoning are qualified as being valid in Buddhism. And so it allows you to act consistent with the belief in emptiness, with past and future lives, with the hell realms, with the ghost realms. Anything you perceive validly, whether directly or conceptually, is accepted as an existing thing. That's a lot to chew on. So what's the point? It's going to be a while before you see emptiness and how karma works directly. But you can deduce it intellectually long before that. If you can figure out how karma works intellectually without seeing it, then you can change your life. And to be able to deduce something is correct and live by it, such as karma and emptiness, is the seed to get you to your Buddha paradise. That is the flower of those seeds. So to see emptiness directly, you first need to deduce that emptiness is true before you can see it directly. And once you have seen it directly, once you have done that, you can become an enlightened being. So we use debate and logic to figure out the truth. And you have to start with a subject, right? Then you have a subject, and then what are you trying to prove? And then the reason you're trying to prove that. So what is a reason? Definition of a reason in Tibetan Buddhist logic is anything I put forward as a reason. It doesn't have to be a correct reason. It doesn't have to be logical. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's just anything that I put forward, right? So let's say it's right to study Buddhism. What's the subject here? Study Buddhism, right? Because the sky is green. The sky being green is the reason. In my opinion, it's not a very good reason. So anything you want to give as a reason will qualify as a reason. It doesn't have to be correct. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't even have to exist. Sometimes the sky is green, but not very often. Like during tornadoes and things, I think it gets kind of that color. But it's a place to start. So generally we pick something that the other person can agree upon, a reason. So we have to relate it to where other people are coming from. So what is a correct reason? The definition of a correct reason is a reason that has three relationships. There have to be three relationships which hold together for a reason to be correct. So what are these three relationships? Say chokchu,
Chokchu,
chokchu.
chokchu,
Here, chok is subject and chu is reason. So the reason. The relationship between the reason and the subject must hold. So that means that whoever you're debating with, could be your brother, could be another Dharma student, that debating with must already accept the reason applies to the subject. So take, for instance, say draw jepa. Draw jepa. Draw is sound. Jepa means made. Sounds are made. Being a made thing applies to sound. So sound is our subject. And it's a made thing. So the person you're debating with has to agree on that. Yeah, sounds a made thing. Okay, I can accept that. Let's go from there. What's next? Say Jacob. Jacob. Jacob is this thing that it's a kind of awkward phrase. It's called a positive necessity. Say positive necessity. We're also going to have a negative necessity. So what does that mean? There's a positive necessity. It seems very scholarly to me, this phrase. It's like I want a simpler phrase. Between the reason and the quality to be proven. If the reason is true, then the quality must be true. So, for instance, if it's a made thing, it must be a changing thing. Or with sound. Sound is a made thing. We're talking about the quality of sound here. Is that a positive thing? Does the quality describe the subject? Right? Is a made thing, must it be a changing thing? If it's made, it's got to be changing. Because if it weren't changing, it could never be made. Right? So this is the positive relationship. Sound is a made thing. It's a quality of the sound. It's a positive relationship. Say dokyap. Dokyap. Dokyap is the negative necessity, which means that between the quality to be proven and the reason, they don't agree. They are not true. The reason cannot be true. So, I wish I had, maybe I should pull the overhead out. So let's number these again. Chochuk is the reason, subject and reason. JCAP is the positive necessity, which is number 2. And number 3 is the negative necessity. So, for instance, if it is not a changing thing, it can't be a made thing. If it's not to, we have a subject. Subject is number 1. Well, there's another 3 thing. We've got the positive necessity and the negative necessity here, but we have the subject, the quality, and the reason. So, the quality is here is not a changing thing. Then the reason is it can't be a made thing. Right? If it's not number 2, it can't be number 3. If it is a made thing, then it's a changing thing. If number 2 is true, number 3 is true. Okay? Is that clear? Sometimes it seems to me it gets kind of muddled up for me. So another truth test would be if JCAP holds, then DOCAP holds. And this is a confirmation test. There are a few exceptions to this, but we're not going to go into that. So if you test the statement and the 3 hold, it's correct. It's a correct statement. You're going to be doing this on the debate ground like this. It's hard. You have to have a really fast mind. And of course, when you first get out on the debate ground, you're really like, you don't want to say anything to show how stupid you are, show how ignorant you are. And then you just have to dive in because you learn over time and you get better and better at it. And nobody's trying to win. You're all trying to find out what are they getting at here? What is the truth of this? Right? So it's not about winning or losing. It's about finding the truth together. So if 1 chokchu, if 1 is 3, JCAP, then 3 must be 2. DOCAP, if it's not 2, it's not 3. And these are called the 3 suls, the 3 ways. So when you're debating with somebody, they have to accept all 3 of these. If they don't, then you have to give them then you have given them rather a bad or a false reason. And then you have to backtrack and check what you said and rephrase it. Because if they can't agree on it, then you can't go anywhere. You're stuck there. Did I choose the right reason that they can accept? And why is it this way in Buddhist logic? So if you're not teaching already, hopefully you will be teaching, right? we are now lineage holders of ACI, Asian Classic Institute teachings. And quite frankly, I think there's more now than when I don't think there was anything like ACI when it started. And it's an incredibly in-depth course of study. And very, very few Dharma practitioners even have the chance to study this in depth. As I say, I think they do now more than they did even 10 years ago. And more so definitely than 20 years ago. So you're going to be called upon to prove the teachings, right? If you're teaching them. All of them. From the long rim all the way up to the highest tantra. So, and Westerners question things. It's just what we do. We don't just, generally speaking, just accept things on blind faith. It's like, well, why? We're 2-year-olds throughout our lives. Why? That doesn't make sense to me. Why? Tell me, show me. Why? And we have these analytical minds, some of us more so than others. And we haven't just grown up with it. It's not just something we accept because we grew up with it. Oh, yeah, my mom told me karma not to squish a bug, and I don't know why, but that's what she taught me. Right? So if you're going to prove something, you have to start on common ground. You both have to agree. If you want to go anywhere with it, at least. If you don't, you just throw up your hands and you walk away. So this way, you'll be able to bring other people up to a Buddha paradise. Go slowly. Don't hit people over the head. Don't drag them kicking and screaming. If this is true, then this is true, right? Yeah, okay. Well, so if that is true, then what about this? And you just slowly, slowly do it. And you never use anything that the other person cannot accept. So for an argument to be correct in Buddhism, you must use terms and concepts and ideas that the listener already understands. Which means that we have to have a large breadth of knowledge, not just in Buddhism, but in cultures and in other religions. And we need to know the person and where they're coming from. So, this is one of the things I think in politics is that, and in general, I think in many ways, is we stick with people who think like ourselves. It's easier that way, right? If we could do cross-political, cross-religious, cross-cultural interchanges without feeling threatened or defensive or attacking somebody else, the world would be such a different place. I saw a video of a Black man in the South who got to know Ku Klux Klan people personally. He changed their lives because they had never known a Black person personally. Many of them quit the Ku Klux Klan. We need that kind of courage to not just stick to our own, but to be able to be with people of all kinds and to accept others' views and to share our own in a way that other people can hear it. So we have to reduce our argument to facts which the other person can listen to. We have such a divisive country at the moment. This is what we need to learn to do to bring it back together. Okay, I don't agree with you politically, but let's see if we can find some common ground. So if we stick to this approach within the Buddhist context, we can prove the existence of past and future lives. First, of course, we have to prove it to ourselves. We can, with all of these things, we can prove the existence of karma, of emptiness, of a non-existent, the non-existence of a creator, the falsity of our Western worldview. So here are some examples of how this dialectic works, how this debate works. Consider sound. It's a subject, the quality. It's a changing thing. 3, the reason. It's made. 1 and 2 are the assertion. The relationship between the quality to the subject is what we're trying to demonstrate, okay? So the reason, which is number 3, it applies to the subject. Does it? Sound, it's made. Does 3 apply to sound? Does it's made apply to sound? 3 to 1. Yes. Okay? So if the reason it's made is true, this is the positive necessity, number 2, docap, is true, then the quality is also true. So if it's made, it's a changing thing. You still with me? Okay. If 2, which is the quality, is not true, then the reason is not true. Okay, so this is the negative necessity. This is how the 3 relationships work. So for debate, both debaters must agree on definitions. Both debaters must agree that the reason applies to the subject. Both debaters must disagree that the quality applies to the subject. And then you debate to show how the reason applies to the quality. Okay? I'm unready. So the first logic topic that you're ever taught is division of existing things. Do we need a break? So we're going to, the format of this is I'm going to give you the name of it, the definition of it, and then an example of it. So say yupa. Yupa. This is the first division. All existing things. All existing things are divided into 2 categories. Say takpa, which is an unchanging thing. Sometimes it's translated as permanent, which means it will last forever and never stop. However, takpa should be translated as unchanging rather than as permanent, because emptiness, which is a classic example of takpa, is unchanging, but it's not permanent. When there is no more pen, there is no more emptiness it just goes out of existence because there's no object to have to be that it has emptiness. You have to have an object to say that it's empty of self-existence. If there ain't an object there, there's nothing to say that it's self-existent or not self-existent. It isn't there, right? So it's a much better translation to be unchanging. Emptiness does not change. It's either there or it's not there. It doesn't have 50% emptiness or 85% emptiness or 100% emptiness. It's either is 100% empty or it's 0% empty, right? So as long as the emptiness of the pen exists, the fact that the pen doesn't have any nature of its own, that's the emptiness of the pen is completely unchanging. So the classical definition of Takpa is, say, Chudang, Kechikma, Mayinpe. Chudang Kechikma, Mayinpe. Chu, existing things. Dang is and. Kechikma. Instantaneous. Instant per instant. So it means it's changing. Instant per instant. Mayinpe. It is not. So an object which is both a thing and which is not such that it only lasts for a moment. That's the definition of Takpa, an unchanging thing. And the classical example of that is saying, there's two classical examples in fact, say Namka and Tompani. Anybody know what Namka is? Empty space. And Tompani, emptiness. So those are the two classic examples. Emptiness is the classic example of an unchanging thing. It comes into and goes out of existence. It doesn't start, it doesn't end. The other examples are kuntaks. Remember them kuntaks? Mental concepts and facts. An existing thing that is not changing instantaneously. So this is the correct definition of unchanging thing. The point here is that things that don't exist, like horns on a rabbit, right, could be considered to be unchanging. But they're non-existent. They are not objects that exist. So you must define unchanging things as existing things that are unchanging. The second category, say mitakpa. And we're talking about two categories of what? Of existing things. Mitakpa is a changing thing. Kachikma. Changing instant per instant. Anything which lasts only for a moment. Things can be changing in a gross way or a subtle way. If something breaks right in front of you, like I dropped the glass not on the carpet, but on a tile floor, that's a gross changing. And almost every kind of object is wearing out moment by moment. It has a subtly changing nature, or a subtle changing nature. Your pen, does it just all of a sudden run out of ink? Or is there getting less and less ink in it as you use it? minute amounts, you know, if I just make a little line, it has less than what it started. And then it gets even more subtle than that. Think about our bodies and what is happening moment to moment in our bodies. We're constantly sloughing off this and sloughing off that, and new things are growing, and those things are, you know, it's in this constant motion of change. So Buddhism says that the very creation of an object is the cause for its destruction. For its destruction. It comes into being, it's going to go out of being. So the classical examples of changing things are, say, bumpa, which is a water pitcher. Every household in ancient India and in Tibet had, you know, a copper or a brass water jug that you would take to the spring or to the stream, and you would collect your water, and it would be in the house. So they use something very common. The other thing is, say, kawa. Kawa are pillars. So in a hall or a house, it would hold up, you know, a beam that would support the roof, or beams. So these are the two classic examples. You'll be asked for them in your homework. That's why I'm giving them to you. So sometimes mitapa is referred to as impermanent. So why is this not a good definition? Why is it not a good definition, impermanent, as opposed to changing?
Because a changing thing is changing moment by moment.
Right. So Tahia said a changing thing is implying that it, or is changing moment to moment, and impermanent applies that it's just going to end. Right? She's absolutely correct. So we're talking about something that's fleeting, that's transitory, that is changing moment to moment. There are some situations where mitapa is properly translated as impermanent, such as in the Lamrim, impermanence in the form of death, chiwa mitapa, because it is something that just ends, right? So in the monastery, logic, or dura, as it is called in Tibetan, is taught. They start with baby logic, something called collected topics. As I said before, it's taught to little monks around 13 years old for 3 or 4 years, and at 16 years they then begin to study formal logic, which is called perceptual theory. Dura is the most important thing in the world. You can see emptiness directly by using logic. The key is something called chi jedwa. Say chi jedwa. Chi jedwa. And this is the second logic topic: quality and characteristics. Chi is a quality like, quote, car or carness. Okay, something that has the quality of being a car. Things which are characteristic of a car, like Toyota, Subaru, Chevy, Ford. They are characteristic of car. Right? They have carness, things which are typical of car. And there is something which is important about this. Okay, so just hold on to that. Say kelwa. Kelwa is your personal spiritual aptitude. How strong is your spiritual understanding? Some people, and it's based on your goodness, your kelwa. You have more spiritual understanding, the more ethical you are, the more kind you are, the more compassionate you are. You can, and it then allows you, and you either have it or you don't have it. And that will allow you to begin to see into things, the more kelwa you have, to see and understand spiritual things deeper and deeper. How do you get it? You serve your mama, you serve a Dharma center, you take care of others. And if you don't have that goodness, that spiritual, intellectual aptitude, it's another word for aptitude. Capacity. Yeah, you could say capacity. I'm just trying to think of a simpler word than aptitude. I mean, pardon? Ability. Spiritual ability. Thank you. Then you may not understand what we're going to say. If you yourself can perceive an angel and you try and show it to someone who does not have kelwa, will they see it? The angel? No. If they do have kelwa, they can see it too. And it is something you can develop. Either you can have it or you don't have it, and you can develop it. So you have to have kelwa, spiritual ability, based on your good seeds to be able to see emptiness directly. So to even study Majjhimika in the monastery, you had to do a 6-month retreat before studying it. To do what? To develop your kelwa, to develop your spiritual capacity and your understanding. So we're just doing a brief overview. Take the time, study course 13 over and over and over. It's a thick course, and you can't do it all at once. You can only do a little bit at a time. So it goes like this. First, you have to understand subtle impermanence, that things are changing moment to moment. Then you have to understand chi chedra, quality and characteristics. Then, with that, you can see emptiness directly. So chi is quality, or a set, a generality. I'm trying to use some different words here. And characteristic, so just hang in there with me, okay? Characteristic is a subset. So we have a set, which is a group of things, and then we have a subset that is characteristic of that thing. So, complicated way to say it is instances of generality. I like set and subset much better. To me, it's simpler and clearer. So chi, we're talking here the quality or set. Chi, quote, car or carness. It is the general thing. That's what generality means. It's the general thing. The thing you see in your mind when you hear the word car. The generic car. You know, go out in our parking lot and you have 6 different cars and they all look different. But we call them car. Right? We could say trucks too, but trucks kind of come under, let's say, automobiles. That would be the set. So how you know that this thing with wheels is a car is what we're going to talk about. gives it carness. I touched on it a little bit last night. Right? The prominent schools are obsessed with this. When you see carness, you say, oh, car. That is jeta. That is characteristic of carness. A car is characteristic of carness, of car. There is a difference between car, a car, and the car. So, using the example of the car, if the car is chi, general set, then Toyotas, Subarus, Fords, they are specific instances of the subset of car. Right? They are Chedra. It's also true that every specific Chedra, that subset can become a chi. It can become a set and have subsets underneath it. For example, we could take Toyotas, and then we could say Tercel, we could say Prius, we could say Tacoma, and they all come underneath the set of Toyota. Right? So then that Jedrock, Toyota, which was a subset of car, becomes its own set, its own chi, which has its own subsets, which would be Prius, Tacoma, etc. Right? And they become the Jedrock. So general test of whether something is a chi or a Jedrock, something is general or specific, right, is that if you took away all of the chis, would it automatically wipe out all of the Jedrocks? If you take away all of the cars, what happens to the Toyotas and the Fords and the Subarus? Are they there anymore? No. No, they're not. So this is a general test of if something is a chi. We're going to get to why we're doing this in a minute. It's just trying to understand what we're talking about. There are three divisions of chis. One is called nominal. And, well, it's called, there are three divisions, sorry, of chis. It's called nominal because there is only one which is a real chi. The other two are not. So what are the nominal types of chi or quality? Say, Rikchi. Rikchi. Rik means like family or class or category. And chi, as we said before, means something that's general, right? Set. An unchanging thing. So it's one kind of kuntak or one kind of fact. So I know this is complicated and the language is difficult trying to describe it. A general as far as a type or quality. A general type or kind, which has individual things which are characteristic of it. It is formally described as that existing thing which subsumes the multiple things which are of its type. So again, we're talking about carness here and the many things that are characteristic. The classical example is, say, sheja.
Sheja.
Sheja. Knowable things. So think carefully about it. Think of car as either quote car or carness. And again, as I said before, think of the difference between a car, the car, and just car. This is a life or death exercise. Carness is not the same as a car. Carness is a quality, an attribute, a nature. And then there are different objects in the world that possess that nature, or that characteristic, or that quality. The way that your reality, the way that our reality is occurring is closely tied to the question of carness. The reason we are perceiving reality the way we do, what we are doing wrong, the reason that we're suffering is directly related to understanding carness and the quality called car. It's very subtle. Say dunchi. Dunchi. This is another kind of chi. Dun meaning it means generality, but general as far as the object, which basically means the actual mental image. The element that is put on the object, but which is not the object. The mental image of the object. And it must have three things. This is a mental image of something which you have already seen. And you mistake it for the actual object. And the way you do that is you get to it by taking away, by negating all that it is not. So the classical example, and you have to listen carefully because the wording is difficult, is the appearance to the second instant of a conceptual state of mind, which is perceiving a water pitcher, comma, of the opposite of all that is not the water pitcher of the second instant. So Gyele's example, since those words are, just hearing them, it's very hard to follow anyway. But Gyele's example is the opposite of all that a pen is not, as I imagine it, while I perceive something, and that which I mistake as the real pen. I'll say it again. The opposite of all that a pen is not, as I imagine it, while I perceive something, and that which I mistake as the real pen. We're talking, dunchi is a mental image of something you've already seen in the past. Like a pen, like a car, and you mistake that mental image for the actual object. You are not seeing the actual object. You are seeing a previous mental image and putting that onto it. Pen. You're not seeing a pen. We mistake the mental image for the actual object. What are we seeing? We're seeing white, black. We're seeing two cylinders. What are we actually seeing? Our eyes are going like this. Are we seeing the top when we see the bottom? Can you see this side? Well, you're looking at this side? I can't see this side. But we create this whole pen with it. Our minds are, why? We had a seed for it from the past, right? We're totally under the influence of our karma. We organize the data in a certain way. Our mind fills in the blanks. My mind says, yeah, it's round. Can I see that it's round? No. But my mind fills in all those blanks. It creates a dunchi, a mental image of a pen. And you're really only actually staring at a mental image of a pen. Crazy, huh? Say sokji. 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 Sok means a collection. Like when we have a sok, we have a collection of people, and we have a collection of offerings. We have sok together. So sok means a physical collection or a group. So chi here means a general object that has its own parts. How about the body? Right? It's got its own parts. Or a water pitcher, which is the classical example. It has a handle, it has a base, it has a spout, it has, So one particular car is composed of its physical parts. And this is only a gross nominal chi. This is only a gross nominal set. And it's not very helpful in seeing emptiness directly. It's not. But understanding the process of how we conceptualize carness, when you think of car, can get you to see emptiness directly. And that will lead to enlightenment. So, go home, meditate about this for 5-10 years. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's important to think how your past karma is forcing you to see everything in your life. To see emptiness directly, we must be able to distinguish between 3 things. Dunchi, the car. Gyelse, Sokji, a car, which is the idea of Gyelse. And Richi, car, in quotes, the parts that make up Gyelse. The relationship between a Richi and a Dunchi. The fact and my perception of the fact. The pen and the mental image of the pen. The difference between the information or the relationship between the raw data and the image that is forced on me by my karma. So, to understand emptiness, you must investigate this relationship between Richi and Dunchi, between the car and car. Between carness and your mental image in your mind when you think of a car. It will liberate you if you can see this connection. If you realize it directly. How we perceive objects through mental images. And through that, you will realize the ultimate meaning of dependent origination. And that occurs in the hours right before the direct perception of emptiness. A time called chocho, the highest thing. The highest thing before you have the direct perception of emptiness. You will see the subtle changing of things. You will see how you are creating a pot from this shiny thing that you see only this part and a black handle, and you will see how you are putting a mental image onto that and making a pot. Because you're not seeing a pot. You're seeing your mental image of it. So what? So what? We have to stop our mental afflictions to reach nirvana, to reach enlightenment. We have to finish them off. We need to be on the path of habituation, purifying our karma. To get to the path of habituation, we need to see emptiness directly. To see emptiness directly, we need to see dependent origination. Chi Chedrak is the mechanics of how dependent origination works, how projections work. So first we need an intellectual understanding and be very precise and clear about the definitions. And then we need to support it with performing service to others, especially our Lord, and keeping our vows purely, checking our minds as often as we can, keeping our books. We need to understand that when we perceive something, we actually do so by perceiving a mental image, a mental object, and mistaking it for the actual object. The mental object is forced on us by our past karma. One time, I'll just share a little story with you. I was working in the garden of Lama Zopa Rinpoche down in SoCal, California. And Geshe Sopa, I'm pretty sure it was Geshe Sopa was with it. And they were sitting at a table while we were working, pruning the roses, and my friend Brandy and I were working there together. And all of a sudden we heard them say, and they think they know what a tree is. And I have this feeling they were talking about, we're not actually seeing a tree. We're seeing our mental image of a tree. We're not actually seeing a doorknob. We're seeing our mental image of a doorknob. And so when I first took ACI 13, I'm going through this and I'm going, okay, tree. What? There's a subset of trees. There's redwood trees. There's oak trees. There's this tree. There's that tree. Do they look the same? What is the same about them? Then I say they're all trees. And this is the kind of thing you have to really, you're sitting in the car thinking about this while you're driving. It's much more interesting than the traffic, right? And it's like, and try and catch yourself doing it. The whole car thing, you take a car apart. When is it not a car? When is a tree no longer a tree? When is a face no longer a face? And this gives you an insight into how you are just putting together pieces of data and putting a label on them, placing a mental image onto them. An actual object that exists independent of us doing this doesn't exist. And that absence is what emptiness is. So by realizing directly how we perceive objects through mental images, we realize the ultimate meaning of dependent origination. And the realization of dependent origination is the supreme object stage of the path preparation. And it is the flip side of emptiness. It is how things do exist. And emptiness is how things don't exist. They don't exist self-existent. dependent origination. They are dependent on our parts, on our projections, and our labels. They go together. Thank you. Any questions? There's a lot of stuff in that, and a lot of mental exercises. In if it's 2, it's 3. If it's not 3, it's not 2. If it's 3, it's 1. And then cars and carness and the car and a car and the tree and a tree and tree. There's a lot in there. It's not something that can be digested in 2 hours. So think about it. Save it for some time when you have some time to think about it. And if you haven't done course 13 yet, do it at least once. I've done it 3 times at least, and I've taught it several times, and it's coming easier to me now. I'm not so confused about 3s and 2s and 1s and this and that. So, I guess maybe my Kalwa is getting stronger. So no questions? So you have between now and next week to think about this? At least, next 5 years. So our meditation assignment is trying to identify a mental image or quality in your mind that you are actually watching when you think you are observing an outside object. Pen. Are you seeing the pen or are you seeing a mental? Try and catch yourself. That's basically what. Try and identify that mental image. In Geshe Michael's latest meditation, the lion stance, after you go through, going through the form realms, all form realms and all the 4 formless realms, he then asks you to see your teacher sitting in front of you and see that karmic seed ripening and becoming your teacher. This is the mental image that you are producing. And to catch yourself, to catch that karmic seed opening. This beautiful, shining karmic seed opening and that becoming. It's the same thing. And that's why it's 64 per finger snap. To keep this whole picture going, it's got to go fast, those karmic seeds ripening, things changing that quickly. You know, we're just shooting them out there constantly. And like in the Matrix, can we slow it down enough that we can see ourselves doing it? Alrighty. Thank you for coming this weekend. Thank you for getting me to teach this. Let's dedicate this to catching ourselves, mistaking mental images for the object, and having the experience of true joy, independent of that, and the direct perception of emptiness, and others too. Nicole. Sange Shindu Mite Uwarhi Joku Nandam Shingma Chuparshu Namguru Ratnamandala Kamyayataya Viwadi Kewoko Sunam Yashin Sosokshin Sunam Yashe Leishwe Dampar kulito parsho